Welcome to the Look Good, Move Well podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the episode. Today, I'm going to kick things off by kind of bragging a little bit.
Yeah.
Satya glanced over and was peeping out my Whoop recovery score. She was like, whoa, did I just see you had 6 out of the last 7 days in the green? And I said, affirmative. Affirmative. And if y'all don't know about Whoop, this is not a plug or a paid promotion. However, Whoop is a tool that will basically, in my opinion, do two really great things for you. Will accurately or at least consistently track your sleep, and it will also provide you with an HRV score. Heart rate variability is what HRV is, and based upon your sleep performance and with a combination of your HRV, it will give you essentially like what they'll deem a recovery percentage. Are you 100% recovered or are you 0% recovered? Mm-hmm. Anything above, I believe it's 70 or 65 is considered green.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 68. So having multiple days in a row or multiple days or the majority of days in a week green is something that you can strive for by trying to optimize your sleep, optimize recovery. And I have stumbled on some really good behaviors in the last 6 months or 4 to 6 months that have helped me better improve my HRV averages. So as an example, when I was traveling this past summer and I was out of my routine, I didn't have access to my our normal lifestyle. Mm-hmm. My HRV average, heart rate variability, was probably it was like in the mid 70s. And HRV is something that as an absolute score, you want to see it higher relative to the individual. So if your average goes from in the 70s to in the 90s over the span of 6 to 12 months, that is a good sign that your fitness level is improving and your general how well you're taking care of yourself from a recovery standpoint is also improving. If it goes down, that's a good sign that maybe you need to address your recovery practices. But anyway, it was about in the mid 70s. Now, this week, my average HRV is about 120, which is significantly higher, which is where it was prior to the trip in the low hundreds, mid 110s. And so I have adopted my sleep routine of I do the hot. So I get in the hot tub or in a hot shower. Mm-hmm. Then so I get my body quite hot, which I have come to find out actually can increase intracranial pressure.
Intracranial pressure?
Yes, which then helps with when you cool off at night, it helps get some of the metabolites and like kind of the lymph drainage out of your brain. So this is like good ways to like improve your cognition, maybe memory, but also like nervous system recovery. Mm-hmm. So hot and then cool down. You can either cool down like you jump in a cold shower or you jump in a cold plunge or you just get in a super cold, room. Because if you elevate your body temperature before bed and then your body's going to naturally push a bunch of blood to the surface, you have evaporative cooling and then cools your core temperature down. So hot before like maybe an hour to 2 hours before bed actually leads to being very cool at night, plus the cool room and a cool bed. I also have been doing mouth tape, a nose strip to open up my nasal passages, and an eye mask, which I used to had blackout curtains, but then there's light that seeps into the room.
I do the eye mask.
So the eye mask is like is clutch.
Get a silk one.
I got that. Mm-hmm. It's really nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe if you want to drop a couple essential oils on there, that can also help. I don't love lavender, but I hear it's quite good. Anyway, that's the routine, and also making sure that I do lower my protein intake on my last meals of the day. That has been helpful for me. And then keeping from eating, nothing within 2 hours of bed. All of that. I know it seems crazy, but it has dramatically improved my recovery. And I've also found out that if I push my strain too hard, I really give too much effort. Anything above a 9 or a 10 on my strain, for those Whoop people out there, makes my recovery tank. So I can't push that hard anymore. That's why I walk and do pump exercises.
This is vastly different from my own recovery protocols.
Yes.
Although we have the sleep mask in common.
Yes, we do. So hopefully there's some nuggets in there for you all. And if you want more information on the recovery protocol or this topic, definitely hit us up. But we're going to jump, because that was plenty of banter. We're going to jump into the topic of the day. So would you like to introduce what we're talking about?
Yes, I would. This week's topic was inspired by Shane. Shout out to Shane. He's a dad in our FBB community who wrote in to Marcus asking for some new dad fitness tips. And we just featured him in our email newsletter because he went and applied a lot of tips and crushed it. And the aspect of the newsletter that I really liked was featuring how he basically did a mind flip where instead of saying, hey, I'm a new dad and my kid was just born, how do I do the bare minimum? How do I hang on for dear life? How do I keep some semblance of something going? He was like, no. How do I get in the best shape of my life and be a new dad? Because those two things can also be important and go together. It's not a must-have to do that, but he really did a great job of turning the narrative around. Mm-hmm. And it made me think that there's a lot of opportunity to be had in challenging your assumptions about your limitations. And so I wanted to bring up the question of what is the biggest mental 180 that you have done with health or fitness or nutrition that has really challenged an established belief, whether that's something commonly held or something that you held personally, and you really got a lot of benefit from doing a mental flip.
Yeah, well, I love Shane's story, and Shane is, I actually met him 2-3 years ago. He had me as a guest on his podcast, and then we've kind of stayed in touch ever since. And I even introduced hey, you should maybe try some functional bodybuilding. And back then he was like, yeah, I think I might dip my toe. And now he's more than dipping his toe. He's really kind of embraced a lot of the philosophies and the practices, both nutritionally and lifestyle and training. And his story and how you're kind of framing it is he was about to become a dad, and the narrative around that is that everything's going to kind of go out the window at that point.
Yep.
You're going to develop a dad bod. Or I saw a shirt that was funny. It was it's not a dad bod, it's a father figure. Either way, it's there's just it's not just an assumption, it's a generally accepted reality and truth that at this point things are just going to be this way.
Yeah.
And he sort of refused to not just refused to accept it, but sort of went to the other end of the spectrum to say no, this is my time to be the best ever.
Yeah. And
this is sort of what I deeply believe as kind of an ongoing mindset is the moment you start to find yourself being pulled towards, well, this is just what happens at this stage of life.
Yes.
Or what do I do to just maintain? Or, what can I do to just stay slightly above, becoming decrepit and, or basically
decrepit.
Yeah. Or deteriorating into my, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old self. That is a very slippery slope into not only seeing a decline in your physical, mental, emotional well-being, but it's a slippery slope into where you then become in this sort of deep deficit where it's exponentially harder to climb out of.
Yeah.
Not to say once you lose something you can't get it back, but if you really accept that this is just the best I can do. And then over time, that will lead to like a less and less and less and less of whatever you're trying to maintain. By the time those incremental losses have amounted to something really big where you're like, I got to make a change, it's going to be a very, very big climb to come out of.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to actually say is that if you can adopt Shane's mindset almost on a consistent basis where it's like, I'm not going to just do better than the average, but I'm going to shoot for the polar opposite of this. You doesn't mean you're going to become world class. It doesn't mean you're going to have his success. But if you're shooting for $100 million and you fail and only make $1 million, that's a hell of a lot better than being like, hey, I'm just going to try and I'm trying to make 10 grand and I failed and I only got $100 in my pocket. Like set your goals high. And if you fail, or you don't quite succeed, like you're still immensely proud of where you're at, and it separates you so far from like the worst case scenario of where you are not wanting to arrive at. And so it takes a very it takes some bold thinking.
Yeah. It
takes some real, like, you have to be ready to go against the norms of what's acceptable. You have to be the person that welcomes, it's like we kind of joked about it, but it's like, hey, if you're not getting fit shamed, then you're not actually, are you really working hard enough? Like if your friends aren't like asking you why you never drink on the weekends with them, like then maybe you haven't established like, maybe that was a bad example. I don't mean to like go into alcohol related conversations and debates here, but sort of like, have you really stretched yourself to be like, I'm not gonna just try and do a little bit better than the average. Like I'm going to rewrite my own narrative and this whole narrative about what I can accomplish or what I should be able to accomplish at this stage of life with this obstacle in my way, with this body, with this, job, whatever that might be on your plate that most people would just assume, oh, well, you got a career, you got 2 kids, you got 3 kids, you got, you're 50, like, you're doing great. Like, aren't you doing great? It's like, no, I'm a little bit above average and I want to be exceptional. And just by shooting for exceptional, you will then remain above average for the next 3 decades. And that's really what you want. If you say, oh, I'll just kind of do what it takes to be average, well, that is actually the inputs that are going to keep you heading downhill over time. Yeah.
What are some other examples and stories of like reframes like this? Because one that's coming to my mind is during the pandemic, there was just this commonly held assumption that like everybody was just going to gain 20 pounds, like the pandemic 15, 20 pounds, like, and the pandemic is like pretty much over now. I hope, God. But, I think that there are just a lot of these like messages that we just culturally take for granted. And I think it's helpful to just hear examples and stories of yourself, people we know, clients that have flipped the script a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, the pandemic stories of like people who had 2 dumbbells in their gym or in their house and they put on muscle and lost body fat. It was like, whoa, that shouldn't have been possible. And yeah, if you were like super dialed in, training consistently with, lots of barbells and big plates and machines, and then you suddenly only had 2 dumbbells, like, okay, you might not be able to achieve the same stimulus with your 30-pound dumbbells. However, there were a lot of people who were like not in great shape when the pandemic started and the gym was taken away from them, the gym that they were not using to its full capacity, and they weren't, fully consistent and committed to their fitness journey. And so it's like, oh, well, okay, now I just got a pair of dumbbells, like things are really going to go to shit.
Yeah.
Whereas a few people in that were like, oh, this is my time. This is my time to grind and to like, I don't care. I'm going to get after it. It's like it's not the circumstance or the program or the situation. It's the person at the center of that that's like, no, I'm going to do it differently. And then what resources do I have to actually accomplish this? Okay, this is going to be my new challenge. I'm going to set a really high goal or a high bar for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. As you're talking, I'm kind of building like the how-to playbook, in my mind. And it's like, okay, first there's this assumption around time of life, right? Like, okay, I have to, rethink the narrative of like new dad equals no time.
Yeah.
I have to rethink the narrative of can't get to a gym means can't make gains. And so what are the ingredients of the recipe to, really support yourself to flip the script? Is it like seeing examples of other people? Is it having mental, emotional support around you? Is it having a structured plan? Like, what do you see as the things that help make someone successful in this or not?
I think it has to start with like a belief, and then like the term I used before, like a bold and almost like I'm going to venture towards like thinking like, I'm setting too high of a goal for myself, but it just has to be a
like
bold,
a 10x, like
yeah, like there you go, Grant Cardone 10x, like I'm not going to just double my efforts. I'm going to 10x my efforts. I'm going to go all in and really say that I'm going to do this better. And this is kind of, what comes to mind is like, okay, the 30-day nutrition challenge.
Yeah.
It's like the energy and the goal and the activation energy behind a 30-day nutrition challenge. Like, I'm going to crush this thing. I'm going to really blow the lid off. Like, we like to knock that in the fitness community as health and fitness coaches, because it's like, well, that's not sustainable. But there's also part of it that is really psychologically powerful. It's like, I'm not going to just like, make one small little thing change to help me. Like, I'm going to go all in on something and really try and categorically shift myself out of where I was before.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in Shane's case, he took the 30-day challenge and he's like, no, this is my year challenge and I'm going to really commit to, but it's almost like, how is it related? It's like, he's like, no, like the 30-day challenge is not just a 30-day challenge. It's like, I can be that person on the other end of it. I know I can be that person, and it's going to take a lot of work, but I want to be that person that I could visualize at the end of this thing. And I want to be that person ongoing. And I'm going to do things that I've never done before, and it's going to be hard, but I truly want to shift my thinking. Like, I'm not going to just get a little bit better. Like, I want to get exceptional in something.
Yeah. Yeah. For yourself, you're a person who is exceptional as compared to the average person, for sure, and even people who are super fit. And I'm wondering if you have a way that you describe that state that is your, like, what is Marcus Philly's exceptional, state of being? How do you think about that for yourself?
I mean, it's changing more and more for me from, physical goals. I think I still maintain a really high standard of myself, and with regards to like my physical fitness and how I just approach health and fitness. I think that's been the case for a long time,
right.
Probably way before I had any type of social media following or, anybody knew what I was doing. It's like I had a high expectation and a high standard for myself. I think I've internally placed some even greater pressures or higher standards on myself that I've grown into the public eye as a fitness coach and influencer. But it's just, that's kind of remained. So that's not like something that is now my vision of myself. Like, I need to create this, exceptional physical athlete specimen type. Like, that doesn't drive my choices in that department.
Yeah.
I think now I'm like, okay, I know how much time and energy that has taken up in my life. How do I create that type of, what's that vision of me look like as an exceptional person in parenthood, relationship, and essentially as a business owner or an entrepreneur. Because I've been a good coach, and I've been a good, I've done really well at like conveying a message to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think that has been big part of the foundation of our company. But the next tier is not like, oh, I need to get better at coaching. I need to get better at speaking. It's like, no, I need to get better at like, how do the pieces that don't involve the coaching and the message, like, how do I get better at that with my team so that more people can hear the coaching and the message?
Yeah.
And that's an area that I really am trying to, take inspiration, be bold, like look at people who are way further ahead of me, and just put myself in proximity to people who are doing it, maybe not in the same industry exactly, but they're doing it very well. And so as an example, like we got to go to Super Training yesterday, which is the home of like Mark Bell's company, the Slingshot. He's built a number of companies, but all on the backbone of this very successful, equipment manufacturer and now media company. And it's just like putting myself in situations like that where I'm like, wow, you're like, how did this is possible? Like, geez, you've really done something bigger than I've ever even really thought of. And so maybe that leads into an actual practical application step for our listeners, which is like getting around people that are doing it in a way that is like unusually, like, it's unusual or exceptional or way above the standard. And I don't mean to speak for like the other people in the room right now, but it's like you come to functional bodybuilding and you start spending time around here and you're just like, oh, this is how, wow, this is like a whole different way of looking at health and fitness. Like, cause I'm observing it in Marcus or in maybe somebody else that's here, and just sort of the lifestyle and the rhythm that we're in. It can be, it's not to use the overly quoted, like you're the average of the 5 people you spend your time around, but it's like leveling up or exposing yourself to people that are not just like where you want to go, but way above where you want to go, and trying to emulate those behaviors.
Yep.
You're bound to get to your average, to the goal average that you want, and likely well beyond it if you just stay focused on like, what are the things that those people are doing? How can I emulate that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. When it's kind of a fun question of like, if you could 10x yourself, what would that look like? I mean, all my goals around business, but, or we speak about that aspect a lot, but for fitness, like the thing that I think of is, the person that just endures like very steadily and consistently, like over the long horizon. And that's exactly what happened. Like when I started martial arts, cause I started doing Kung Fu when I was in my early 20s, and I sucked so bad. I was like definitely the worst person there. And then I just stayed for 17 years and got a 4th degree black belt, and was like crushing it by the end. So it's like, I'm like just the person that like is definitely not athletic, strong, naturally gifted, talented physically in any capacity, but just has that like, I'll be here 20 years from now, like just doing strict ring muscle ups because I just hung in there,
Yeah. And there's something like, maybe my final thought on this is like, to take the Taekwondo example, Kung Fu example, it's like you go in and, okay, you might be a white belt to start. You're a total rookie. But you see that there's a 4th degree black belt. Like if there was never that on the wall and it was just down here, then, and you're willing to play the long game, extend the time horizon of your, where you want your efforts to materialize into success, a result. Well, it's two different. You have to have, that's two inputs. You gotta, number one, be ready to endure and stick with it for a long period of time. If you can, the longer that period of time is, the greater the likelihood of, growth and success. But you can't just be like, I want to, in the next 10 years, I'd like to drop 2 pounds. If let's say you're overweight or obese, like you've given yourself enough time, good for you, but you set your goal target way too low.
Right.
Because you didn't believe, or you weren't bold enough to say, no, I'm going to lose 100 pounds in 2 years or whatever. Right. Don't be the person that says, I'm going to lose 100 pounds in a month, because now that's a dream state. Right. But I'm, bold versus like, irrational and totally in the clouds.
Yeah.
They're different.
Yeah.
And then undershooting because you're scared of scared of failure. So you had 17 years, plus you had this deep journey and history and, probably examples within your kung fu community of like, oh shit, like that person's great. And I'm willing to, and here you are, like I've got examples of people, plenty of examples of people doing the kind of stuff that you want to see yourself being able to do in the gym, thanks to social media, thanks to just being around some individuals here, like, and you have the patience, but you set your targets high enough. Like that's a dangerous recipe for, like becoming a true badass and successful. Like, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Anyhow, hopefully that was something that people could digest, and listening, you were like not confused by something I just said, but I wanted to hit home. Okay. That is a good recipe.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear people's 10x dreams. If you're afraid to speak it publicly, just send us a DM, just whisper it in my ear. I want to know.
Hell yeah, I do. And shout out again to Shane White for his 10x vision of becoming the fittest version of himself that he's ever experienced, and way beyond in the first 8 months of having his first baby.
Yeah.
So that's a dad bod right there. He crushed it.
Love it.
Okay, we'll see y'all next time. Thank you for joining us.